Welcome to another episode of One Mo Moment, the podcast where we look into the pivotal moments that shape the lives of extraordinary individuals. I'm your host, Mo Gerhardt, and joining us today is Lisa Byington, a true trailblazer in the field of sports broadcasting. Lisa's broken barriers and set new standards in a traditionally male-dominated field. Her journey is nothing short of inspiring. In this episode, we'll explore Lisa's path to becoming a prominent sports broadcaster, the challenges she's faced and overcome, and the memorable moments that have defined her career. Let's get started.
Discover the power of a single moment with One Mo Moment. Get ready to hear the pivotal moments that have shaped the lives of extraordinary individuals. From inspirational stories and professional breakthroughs to personal anecdotes and life-changing decisions, One Mo Moment uncovers the essence of what drives us forward. Listen to conversations with industry experts, creatives, and everyday heroes, each sharing their unique journeys and valuable insights. Get ready to be inspired, motivated, and moved, because one moment has the potential to change everything. Now here's your host of One Mo Moment, Mo Gerhardt.
Welcome, Lisa. Thank you very much for joining me today on the One Mo Moment podcast. It's a thrill to have you on. I know our paths have crossed a little bit in the past, but honestly, it's been a little while, and I just want to say thank you for joining me today.
Well, it's a pleasure to get reconnected with you, Mo. First of all, congratulations on the podcast, and just congratulations on just being you, and just your perseverance, your strength. It's very, very admirable. So it's my honor to be on here with you.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. Honestly, I want to jump sort of right in. We'll start with your childhood. I know both of your parents were teachers. Both of my parents were teachers, so obviously very familiar with that, what that's like as a child. What grade levels or what did your parents teach?
Well, they were, my dad, first of all, he was a middle school counselor. So you can imagine all the things that he had to navigate through. And my mom taught everything from elementary school up into high school. And I'll share this. So my dad, they both were just very instrumental in raising me. My dad ended up being my coach at several levels and for several sports. And then ultimately was my high school basketball coach, which was very important to me and still very meaningful. My mom also, a lot of people ask, what women did you admire growing up? And, at the time, my mom actually had to stop teaching. She chose to stop teaching to raise my sister and I. My sister is 2 years older than I am. So she was teaching, stopped for about, till we were about, middle school, high school age. And then she, as in her 40s, decided to go back to teaching, which you can imagine how tough that is for a 40-something-year-old competing against the 20-somethings who are just graduating. And but I just always remember her perseverance in that she was very creative. She got into substitute teaching first, like that was her door back into teaching. And then she was so good that it would have been silly for, the school system to not hire her. So she just made it kind of a no-brainer decision that she went from not working to substitute teaching. I forgot to mention that she got her master's during all this, by the way. And then she became full-time. And when she returned back to teaching, she got back into the middle school space and then ended her career in the elementary school space.
Yeah, that's crazy because I know my mom, she was lower elementary for her career, kindergarten through third grade, through the different years. And then my dad was both high school and middle school, also a coach. So once again, just very familiar with that lifestyle, with those values, and what that meant as a kid too, to have two parents in the educational system, to be able to sort of be those role models.
Yeah, and Mo, then you can appreciate, I always say that I think coaching and teaching are, two very blessed professions because you really, really can directly shape a young person's life in both of those professions. And being a former athlete, I experienced it. You being, covering sports, you've seen it. And, I've just seen it at both levels with my parents in the coaching space and the education and teaching space, that they just, you just create so many great relationships and have such direct impact that is just so meaningful.
Yeah, my dad actually just passed away this last year, and one of my favorite things still is going back and reading some of the letters that were sent by some of his former students, by some of his former players, just touching on how he impacted their life. And that's something that I'll always cherish. I knew my dad was a great teacher, a great coach, but to hear from other people their stories about how he was able to lift them up, or find them before they slip between the cracks. It's just something that I'll always cherish. And it, not that I haven't always looked at my dad highly, but it just sort of even put him in another perspective that I hadn't really seen. And it's, like I said, it's just something that I'm always going to cherish, is being able to have those letters to go back and read.
Yeah, I'm glad that you have those too. And it makes me wish that we wrote each other more letters these days instead of just text messages, right?
Yep.
But that's great that you actually have that physical piece, that letter of meaning. So that's awesome.
Yeah, one of the other things I saw when I was just doing a little research beforehand is you had mentioned, I know in another podcast once, that as a kid you like to play with a balloon in your house, that you would blow up a balloon and act like it was a basketball or whatever. And once again, that just brought back memories to me, because I remember doing the exact same thing with my brother, but instead it was more on the volleyball side. My dad, I mentioned he was a coach in high school. He did baseball and volleyball. So we were raised sort of with those two sports. And I just remember with my brother indoors just batting that balloon around. We put actually we'd tie a string like across our living room to be like the net, and then we would just pretend hitting it back and forth like a volleyball. So that was something that really to me resonated. And I just sort of wonder, when you think back to those memories as a child, how does something like that just sort of also foreshadow what was then in your future?
Well, yeah, it's fun. I love that you picked that out of the story. Not many people ask me about that, but it is true. Like I would, it was mostly during the winter time. So I grew up in Michigan, and we know that
Yep.
Michigan winters can get kind of cold, right? So, and with ice on the driveway and stuff, I don't think my parents necessarily trusted me always to go out in the driveway and shoot baskets. And so also it would usually always coincide with a basketball game going on the TV too, is ultimately
Okay.
kind of what it came down to. So I kind of wanted to follow the game and also just be active, right? So I would blow up a balloon, and that would be my basketball, and I would dribble the balloon around in the kitchen floor. And then I remember my mom would be coming up from like the basement or something, like doing laundry, and then she didn't realize that the actual door to the basement was also my imaginary hoop. So I'm
Of
like
course.
slam dunking. She had to like make sure I wasn't making this like 360 slam dunk move by the time she's coming up from the basement. But those are great memories, and what I love about it is that my parents just gave me the freedom to do stuff like that. They never told me, Lisa, you have to focus on basketball. I gravitated towards basketball on my own, so my parents were open to me trying everything when I was growing up, from gymnastics to dance to swimming to tennis to softball to soccer to basketball. I got to try all that stuff. And then they allowed me to pick where my interest was and where my passion was and where my love was. And so that's one of the most important things that I take away from being able to, just experiment with sports, is I got to carve my own path. It wasn't mom and dad saying, this is what we want you to do. And then number two, like at recess, I was the only girl playing soccer with the boys.
Yep.
And I was fine with it because part of it is I was fine with it because I would go home and talk to my parents. Hey, how was your day at school? What'd you do at school? Then what'd you do at recess? And I would tell them, and they would, ask who would play soccer. And then they realized that I'm the only girl playing soccer at recess. And they never let me think that that was odd or different or weird. And so that really, I think, planted a seed with me early. Is it didn't matter if I would look to my right or my left and not see someone that looked like me. Like if it was something that I wanted to do, I would just go and do it and not think twice about it. So
Yeah,
I
I
really
can very much relate to those sentiments growing up with a physical disability and the only one in my school with a physical disability, looking different. I still, like you said, on the playground, my friends, we all found ways to still be able to include me in those activities. And the same thing, my parents always allowed me to try to figure out those ways to be involved, to still love sports, to find other ways to be active. And I think that was so key from an early child perspective to be able to know that support was going to be there, that even though I was looking to do something that honestly not many in my situation had done, and there weren't really any role models to look up that were doing that, I still had that support and encouragement to try to, just do whatever I wanted to.
Yeah, yeah, and right, and you probably didn't realize it at the time. Like I didn't realize it at the time, like how empowering that was.
Yeah.
And then as you and I become adults, right? Like it doesn't matter if people tell you, oh, I don't know if you can do that, Mo, or I don't know if you can do that, Lisa, or no one's done that before. You just kind of shrug off and dust off that criticism and keep it going because you had people when we both were really young who let us have the freedom to do stuff like that.
You mentioned growing up in Michigan. I know it was Portage Northern, correct? The high school that you went
Yeah,
to?
go Huskies.
Yep. I know that program had sort of struggled and really had not been all that competitive prior to your sister and yourself being able to make it to that varsity level and then your dad coming in and coaching. What did that mean for you to be able to play with your sister?
Actually, playing with my sister and my dad was a little challenging at the beginning, as you can imagine. And we actually, I will say this, we had a great group of athletes at the time that were really, really committed. Some volleyball athletes and some tennis athletes and soccer and softball athletes who all just, it was like a perfect blend and the perfect timing. So I would say it was definitely a group effort to find the success that we had during those years. But yeah, the high school basketball program didn't have a winning season by the time my sister and I were high school age. But I'll say this, it was challenging, as you can, for all the reasons that you would imagine, it'd be challenging to play for your dad or play for your sister.
Yeah.
And, I was a freshman. My sister was a junior. And so you can imagine a freshman being on the varsity with their dad as the head coach, and how much maybe pushback you might get from some of the upperclassmen. And so my dad was probably the toughest on me on that team when I was a freshman and a sophomore than anybody else. And so I understood that. So for me personally, just to deal with that and maybe some of the slight pushback I would get from some of the upperclassmen, is something that I had to deal with my freshman and sophomore year. And so that is something that, like, my sister as a junior and senior on those teams, those were like our crossover years in high school,
Yeah.
So, but growing up, I'll say this, like my sister and I were each other's best friends. We would, we were playmates, we were everything, so I know that having little sis always around, like on the varsity and stuff. But she, I know, supported me and was there for me and backed me, which I appreciate during those times. And then after getting past, like dad as the head coach being tough on you your freshman and sophomore year, I had earned my stripes my junior and senior year. And so it was much easier. I had a much easier time as an upperclassman. And some of the best memories I have, though, Mo, is playing on those high school basketball teams. And we got to the state semifinals for the first time in school history. And it was played during the afternoon on a Friday afternoon. And our whole high school brought 3 to 4 busloads of our classmates and stuff to go watch in Battle Creek. And because that's where it was at the time.
Right.
the state championships. And so it was great. Like, honestly, it's one of my favorite memories. I still have a feature video of my last high school game, and one of the CBS affiliates in Kalamazoo, Michigan, did it on just dad coaching daughter sort of storyline, and they got a piece of video of me walking off the court for the final time because we had lost in the semifinals, and my dad walks up and gives me this embrace, and so it's still like, if you have one of your most like cherished things, like that feature is one of my most cherished things, because no one else had captured that moment, but WWNT and Kalamazoo, Michigan did, and just forever grateful to put a cap on what was not always a perfect time in high school, because of the challenges and stuff, but it ended up being, honestly, some of my best sports memories during that time.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I have an older brother, and he played for my dad. And I remember watching him go through some of those same challenges. And honestly, my dad kept my brother on the JV team his freshman year. And I remember he had the talent to be on varsity. And then it was actually, the MVP of that JV squad. And then watching once he was brought up to varsity, seeing my dad be harder on him than the other kids because of that outside noise, like you were talking about. There's always going to be those people chirping in the background, and so he had to do that. But to see how my brother was able to handle that and also understand that situation, and then be able to rise and then excel, still on that team, was something that, as a younger brother, was always inspiring to me to be able to watch.
Yeah, totally. So you get it. Not everyone has that opportunity to play for a mom or a dad, but and that's the best way to describe it. It can be challenging, but it can be so rewarding and memorable as well.
All right, so definitely we see the Milwaukee Bucks gear that you've got on, and also in the background, this sort of path to get there. I know after graduating from Northwestern, where you were a two-sport athlete, both basketball and soccer, you went to Alpena, Michigan. And for myself, when I heard that, obviously put a big smile on my face. Being born and raised in Traverse City, Alpena we always sort of joked. Alpena liked to think that they were our big rivals. We never really tried to acknowledge that, but definitely very familiar with Alpena, their facilities, just sort of that whole community. So what was that like for you, starting your news broadcasting career in Little Alpena, Michigan?
I just I didn't know what to expect. I was given the advice. I mean, it's not where you start; it's where you finish. And so, to me, Alpena was really one of the only job offers that I had at the time coming out of school. I wanted to do sports, and not a lot of sports people were hiring me. A lot of the tape and my resume reel that I had really didn't showcase sports. It was like my schooling. It was all like news stories and stuff. So I actually had more looks in the news department than I did the sports department. So I really had to kind of prove to people that I could do sports. And Alpena was one of the only like sports department at the local news level that wanted to take a chance on me and offer me a job. So I joke with people that I hit scan for my interview. I was driving up north to northern Michigan. I hit scan on the radio dial and went all the way through without stopping, and I was on FM. Like, that's how remote the place is, and that's before Sirius radio and all that stuff. So for people who are like listening to this, who are like, why didn't you just do satellite radio? But we typed our scripts on typewriters, literally, and we had the paper that you can rip off and then like tape together, and then there was like our teleprompter was actually like almost like a microscope that pointed down at the scripts, and we hired an Alpena high school student to actually do this and like, pull the scripts. And it was like jerry rigged to like some wire from this high school student doing this with the camera pointing down, and somehow that was connected to like a small little TV screen about this big that was our teleprompter. But I wouldn't change it for the world, because got to live in a different place in the state of Michigan. Northern Michigan is not some place that I lived in. I would vacation a lot of times up there, but not spend a lot of time. So I was there for about a year and a half and got to cover the Brown Trout Festival, got to cover Alpena Community College Lumberjacks, got to cover a lot of different high schools too. And each high school, and Mo, you can appreciate that, like each high school was probably like 30 minutes away from each other, you know?
Yep.
So it's not like when I was working in Lansing, Michigan, where you could knock out like some of the Lansing city schools and try to get highlights of a high school football game within 45 minutes. Like it would take you sometimes 45 minutes to go from one high school to the other. But I wouldn't change it for the world because I got to do everything. I put a camera on my shoulder. I shot my own highlights from basketball to football to whatever, and shot my own features, edited my own stuff, wrote my own stuff, and then had to race into the bathroom to change and put hair, makeup, your on-air outfit and all that stuff. And I wouldn't change it for the world because it gave me an opportunity to get my foot in the door. It gave me an opportunity to do a little bit of everything. And now that I don't have to do a little bit of everything, I do appreciate the people who are in some of those jobs in those spaces.
Yeah, you mentioned the distance between schools. I remember, like I said, growing up in Traverse City, our closest sort of competition was Cadillac, which was 45 minutes away. And then you mentioned the Lansing area here with Hazlitt, Okemos, East Lansing, all of those schools within minutes of each other. When I've tried to explain that.
And Everett, even grab Holt or like you said, Okemos or Grand Ledge, and you could try to knock all those out in just a few minutes time. So much
so that's always
job number one to job number two.
Yep. Okay, so then from Alpena, you mentioned then to Lansing, where you worked under Fred Heumann for a while at WLNS, and then from there, that's when I know the Big Ten Network basically opened up, or was just even first created, and you did some freelance work for them. And from there, it's really just blown up in many ways. You've been able to do the World Cup. You've been able to do the Olympics, obviously, too. We mentioned the Milwaukee Bucks, and there's a reason I sort of delayed sort of going and talking about the Milwaukee Bucks, because I think people have a tendency to sort of put that on you at first by saying it's the first female to be able to be the lead broadcaster for a men's professional sport. And knowing you and knowing your integrity, your hard work, all of those aspects, I know for you it's not about the first, it's about the actual job itself. And that's why I wanted to sort of wait a little bit more towards the middle or the end of this podcast to actually mention that, because I think in some ways that, I don't want to say it cheapens, but that's not the label that you sort of were striving for. It's more about just being that broadcaster itself, being a role model for both little girls and little boys. And yes, somebody always does have to be the first, and that is a great experience to sort of break that barrier. But I know for yourself, I've heard it's more about wanting to just to be able to be known as a broadcaster.
Well, you said it great. I don't even need to answer, because you said everything that I feel and believe in. But yeah, to reiterate it, I understand that these kind of hires have to happen. I get that. And so I don't take the responsibility of that or the significance of those hirings for granted at all. But when I say I want to be looked at as a broadcaster and eliminate those adjectives, first and female, because I wouldn't be doing my job if I constantly looked at myself as like the first female to do this sort of thing. I'm only doing my job when I put on the headset and I'm thinking of the job at hand, and I'm thinking of myself as the Milwaukee Bucks broadcaster or NCAA men's basketball tournament. I'm the only woman to do play-by-play for the men's tournament. And at the time, it was hard because when that announcement came out, it was like it came out at the beginning of the week and you're preparing for like all these teams and, the magnitude of that kind of moment. and you're still trying to give the respect of the actual hiring of that job. Because this is what I say is, for this to be normalized, obviously we have to have, more female play-by-plays, or more female analysts, or more females in spaces where we just don't see women in those positions. But to do that, you also have to have the executive to have the faith and the belief that you can get it done, right? And so I never take that step, or the actual hiring of me or some of these other wonderful women who are also in some of these, first female spaces. We don't take it for granted, but we also wouldn't, be doing our job if that's the way we defined ourselves. It might be the way that people look at us, or the outside world looks at us, but it can't be the way that we define ourselves, because we just wouldn't be doing what we're doing if that was the case.
Yeah, you mentioned sort of putting the headphones on, being able to do your job. For myself, I know when people have said, "Oh, you're inspiring," or I look up at you to do this or to do that, you're a role model. To me, it's sort of along those same lines. Like, people in their own ways will choose who their role models, who they sort of look up to. And if you yourself try to put yourself into that role, you're not going to be yourself, and you're not going to be acting in the way that they were sort of looking up to in the first place. So I think that's key, like you said, just being able to put that headset on to be able to do your job, not focus on those first. That's where then that inspiration sort of derives from, when you do have the little boys, the little girls, sort of looking up and listening to you and saying, "Hey, I want to be like Lisa." It's because you're being yourself and not trying to be someone that they would look up to.
Yeah, and I'll say this, it was after I did, I'm now 4 years into doing the men's NCAA tournament as a play-by-play. One of the most meaningful messages I got was actually from a college student at Ball State, and a male college student who said, "I just wanted to share with you, like, we talk about all the different announcers who we look up to and admire, and I just want to tell you that I just look up to you and admire you. And especially I just enjoyed listening to you do the men's NCAA tournament." And not like it's like I appreciate one thing over another, but I think it's, I would expect at least little girls or women to be supportive of a woman in that space.
Yes.
I feel like it's more common to get that pushback from men in the world. And so for me to get a young male college student to say, "I look up to you," or "I appreciate you," or "I respect the job that you're doing," to me, that almost immediately erases the gender label, right? Like,
Yep.
I felt like this college student wasn't looking at me as a female broadcaster, but was just looking at me as a broadcaster and doing the men's NCAA tournament, And so for me, that's awesome. And I love the fact, Mo, that you keep saying the boys and the girls and the men and the women, because that to me is where we start normalizing hires that have happened, where you get first and female, or first hires, whatever the space may be, where it hasn't happened before. You normalize it when everyone is paying attention and everyone is giving you the respect, not just the little girls, but also the little boys, not just the women, but also the men of the world who are sitting there watching the sports game.
Yeah, so I know your time is limited, but I also do want to mention the Lisa Byington Award. That was made by the Big Ten Conference, the Big Ten Network. Can you just share with the listeners what that award is all about, and then also what that type of honor was like when you first heard that they were actually even coming up with the Lisa Byington Award?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking about that, Mo. Thank you. It's now in year 3, and essentially it is just giving the best female student U broadcaster across the Big Ten schools this award. And it wasn't my idea; it was a complete surprise, actually. Like, the Big Ten Conference and actually the Big Ten Network worked together to surprise me with it, and it was 3 years ago when I was just hired with the Milwaukee Bucks. Kevin Warren was still the Big Ten commissioner at the time. And I'm not sure. I think he was the one that kind of spearheaded this, but he was saying that, like, look, like, we have a Big Ten graduate from Northwestern, a Big Ten student athlete who is doing some of these, first things. And so, someone needed to believe in her, and someone needed to give her a chance. So why don't we use Lisa as a vehicle to give other women and females a belief and a chance? And so they surprised me with a Zoom call, and it was Commissioner Warren on the other side. I didn't even know why I was doing the Zoom call. They were very generic about it. I almost felt like I was getting called into the principal's office when I saw Commissioner Warren on the other side, but he shared it with me. And so we pick one female who's a student U broadcaster from all the different Big Ten schools. And there's a committee. I'm a part of the committee, and we look through all the tapes and everything. And we make a selection. And so this person gets like a full day in Chicago at the Big Ten Network, and they get to work with me. They get to work with Big Ten Network producers. They get to meet some decision makers at the Big Ten Network. We get to have lunch. We get to have a full day in Chicago. And they also get a chance to sit down in the actual Big Ten Network studios and tape something. So they walk away with something for their reel, which is awesome. And then, I always encourage them to continue to use me as a sounding board and however I can help them. So as we know, the networking piece is so important, especially in broadcasting. And it's no different here. But the meaning of it, like, now I can actually talk about it without getting emotional. But, that first year in particular, every time I talked about it, like, I just thought it was, such an awesome honor and such an awesome award. And I still feel weird that my name is on it. I understand why it is, but I still feel weird kind of saying it, the Lisa Byington Award. But I love it, and the premise of it and the meaning behind it. And it's opening up doors for other women. It's supporting women. We're not in competition with each other. We should be uplifting and supporting each other and looking for ways to do that. And so it helps, young women who want to be in broadcasting. It helps them, give them confidence, support, a network system. And I am always so thrilled whenever it comes to that time, usually in the spring, that we get a chance to look at everyone's tape and make that selection. And all the honorees, even, it's getting tougher and tougher, Mo, which is a good problem to pick a winner. Already, and from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, it's gotten tougher. So, but it's awesome. I really appreciate you bringing that up, and still really appreciate everything that the Big Ten Conference and the Big Ten Network do to support that award and support women in this business.
Yeah, so many things. I wish I could get to here. So many bullet points I still wanted to talk about, but one thing I do want to hear about, what is it like on a nightly basis or on a game-by-game basis being able to watch one of the best basketball players on the planet in Giannis?
Now it's Damian Lillard and the Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks are such a great organization, regardless of how good the players are. It's a great organization to work for. But it's an honor to work for an organization where year in and year out you are a championship contender. And then on top of that, year in and year out, you are serving as a narrator of one of the generational talents in Giannis. Like, we just really haven't seen a talent like that. And but to have both Dame and Giannis, as they were just recently nominated as two of the top 75 players in NBA history, is amazing. So last year was year number 1 with those two incredible athletes and basketball players playing together, and it was a learning process. And so I'm excited here to go into my year 4 with the Bucks, but year 2 of the Giannis Dame era. But it is, there are many moments that, as a broadcaster, there's not like a lot of times where you say that you jump up or you get out of your seat. But every Giannis dunk, I'm doing this. We had a Dame time moment where he hit, a game winner last year against the Sacramento Kings, and it was at home, so it was in Milwaukee, and so that just kind of added to the beauty of the moment and the magnitude of the moment, and it totally made me do this and jumping out of my seat. And so I get that a lot, and you're right, because it is the best and most talented and gifted, greatest basketball players in the world. So, and I'm fortunate to be able to call the WNBA as well. I do some stuff with the Chicago Sky and then nationally for CBS. And so I get that on the women's side too. And it is awesome to just be a part of that. Like, I've just always been such a big basketball fan, since a little kid. We mentioned like me just blowing up the balloon and dribbling around, so it's a very special seat to have. And, Milwaukee Bucks broadcaster before me, Jim Paschke, who had the play-by-play seat for over, 3 decades, had told me that in one of our first conversations: don't ever take the seat for granted. And I don't. Every time I put on the headset and sit in that seat, like, it is a true honor to, in particular, be a part of the Bucks organization, and in particular, just be a part of an era, a generational era that would be hard to top in franchise history in the past, or in the future years to come.
You mentioned the Chicago Sky. I know they had struggled a little bit the previous seasons, but you've got that front row seat now to the Angel Reese show, and obviously 2 rookies being named to the All-Star team in the WNBA for the first time ever right now, with Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese. Angel Reese breaking the consecutive games of double-double records, being able to, really put her stamp on. I think that's the future of the NBA. The WNBA. I'm so excited about the way that I can just see that taking off to another level. That I'm a big lover of women's basketball, and to be able to see and know that I can turn my TV on and now see WNBA games on a regular basis, I love it. I love where that aspect of the game is going.
Yeah, and to see sellouts, and we talk about normalizing things like when I go to, I've obviously do some Sky games, I've done some Fever games for CBS, and I even see grown men wearing Angel Reese jerseys or wearing Caitlin Clark jerseys, and that crossover of I can be a male sports fan and support a female athlete is awesome to see, and so again, it's that crossover between men supporting women, not just women supporting women, but men supporting women, and little boys looking up to female athletes. So it's awesome to see that, and I hope that this momentum that the game has, that women's basketball has, at all levels too, from the WNBA to the college level. I hope that we find ways to continue, that momentum, the passion, and the support of it. And to your point, Mo, like, I grew up and I had to have just male role models, because it was hard for me to turn on the TV and not see and to find a women's basketball game that was beyond a Final Four, a national championship game. It just wasn't available. And so now to have almost every women's college basketball game, you can find it somewhere. If it's not on TV, it's going to be streamed somewhere, so to have that capability and that access for the game is unbelievable. And now we're seeing the fans turn out. Now we're seeing the TV ratings show up, but it's because people are now marketing the sport. People are putting it on ABC and CBS and Fox and NBC, and so it's now on these networks and these spaces and these platforms that it's never been before. And it's really happened, I think, post-COVID shutdown. It's just this explosion, this realization that women's sports can be marketable, and people do want to watch it, and it can be exciting. So I love it, and this is by far been for me, one of the most fun years to cover the WNBA, just because of just the explosion of the passion of the sport, no matter what market you're going into or what city you're going into.
Yep. All right. Last question for you, and I never like to ask, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? Because I think that really diminishes sort of the journey that it takes to get to those points, and everything that, whether it just be being in the right place at the right time, but I do want to ask, what do you sort of have as future goals or aspirations for yourself?
I think just continue to do what I'm doing. Like, I have a great job with the Milwaukee Bucks, and they have given me the freedoms to take advantage of some other great opportunities. Working, like I said, the men's NCAA tournament, doing some WNBA and women's college basketball, having the freedom to do still some college sports is great. And so I learned actually when I was working in Lansing, Michigan, with WLNS, the CBS affiliate there, that if you start like thinking about, well, what more can I do, or can I do something, or I'm missing out on an opportunity, you really don't appreciate where you're at,
Yeah.
So if there's other opportunities that I'm not even thinking about right now, it'll materialize and it'll make sense. But Mo, I've got it pretty good. I work for an NBA championship contender in the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm able to work for one of the most exciting teams in the WNBA in the Chicago Sky. And then I have the freedom still, as a college basketball player, to be able to be in those college sports spaces, whether it's football or softball or college basketball. Not as often, you won't see me as often in those college spaces as I used to be, but I still have the freedom to do that. So I just say, Mo, my life is good. The jobs that I have are amazing, and I am just happy doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much. I could go on and on with more questions here, but I know you're limited, and I just appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be able to join me with this. I also want to personally thank you. I know when I was in the hospital 5 years ago, you reached out to me. I can't tell you what that meant to be able to see that on my phone, a text pop up from you that really touched me, and it's something I'll always remember. So thank you for that, for being the person you are. I look forward to following you and all your successes. And I know you mentioned March Madness. I can tell you my favorite broadcasting teams: Lisa Byington, Steve Smith, Lauren Shahadi. That trio right there was right at the top of my list from this last year. So once again, thank you. I appreciate the time. I love having you on. And if there's ever anything I can do for you, please never hesitate to ask.
Well, Mo, it's as I said at the beginning, it's a great pleasure for me to be on, and I am actually glad that just the fighter in you and this great universe and world that we live in decided that we need Mo still in our lives, right? And I know that was a challenging battle for you and challenging times for you many years ago. So you've always had my utmost respect. And congratulations on this podcast. I'm truly honored to be one of your first guests on it. And
Yep.
Just keep going. Just keep being who you are.
Well, I can tell you just a little bit to sort of show where you sort of fall into that respect. My first guest was Susie Merchant. So I know obviously you also had some connections with Susie and played some roles when you were here in Lansing. But then my second guest was the doctor that saved my life 5 years ago. And then you are the third guest. So I just want you to know,
Wow.
like I said, thank you so much for joining us. And I love just listening to you and can't wait to hear what the future holds.
Wow. Well, here I didn't realize it was like that short of a list, but I
Yes.
am now.
Yep.
I'm really on. So obviously amazing people, and well, thank you. That makes me a little speechless, so I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks for joining us, everyone, on this inspiring episode of One Mo Moment. It was a true privilege to hear Lisa Byington share her groundbreaking journey and the incredible moments that shaped her career. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to One Mo Moment on all of your favorite podcast platforms and leave us a review. Also, be sure to follow both Lisa and me on all social media outlets. Your support helps us continue to bring you inspiring and engaging content. Stay tuned for the next episode, where we'll delve into more pivotal moments with extraordinary guests. Until then, remember, it's not the diagnosis that determines your outcome. Thanks for listening. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of One Mo Moment. We hope you were inspired by the incredible stories and insights shared today. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Don't miss our upcoming episodes where we'll continue to explore the pivotal moments that shape extraordinary lives. Stay tuned for more inspiring guests, powerful stories, and valuable lessons that will motivate and move you. Join us next time for another unforgettable One Mo Moment. Until then, remember it's not the diagnosis that determines your outcome.